Okay, welcome everybody to today's presentation. I'm Ken Goldman. I do communications for the integrated award environment, and we're having a webinar today on the new UEI and changes that are coming. This is the second one that we've held in the last couple of weeks or in the past 2 months or so, and we're going to recap some of the things that we've talked about previously, and we're going to give you some new information about how to get your UEI if you are not fully registered in SAM. So just a couple items to get us started and prepared for today. In the Zoom chat window right there, I am about to paste in a link to our blog area. It's GSA Interact, and this is the IAE space on GSA Interact. And if you follow us there, you'll get all of our latest information, including a recap of today's presentation. In a few days, we'll post this slide deck, a recording of this session, and some answers to some of your questions there on Interact. So when you go to Interact, be sure to sign up in the right-hand column to follow us and enter your email, and then you'll get email notifications when we post. So today's deck and all of the materials will be made available in a few days on Interact. So be sure to follow us there. And just as an aside, we definitely are recording today's session, so I want to make sure that everybody is aware that this is being recorded. And finally, little confusing or challenging sometimes with Zoom. There's really two chat windows in Zoom. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the chat, and there are some people giving their hellos right now there. But if you have questions as we go through today's session, please make sure to enter your questions in the Q&A chat log, which is right next to the chat log and on the other side of the participants list. If you enter your questions in the Q&A, we'll answer some of them as the program is going on. We'll try and carve out some time at the end of the program to answer some common questions, and then we can capture all of the questions and answer the ones we can't get to in writing. So any questions, please make sure you use that Q&A chat log in Zoom. So with all of that fun stuff out of the way, I'm about to turn it over to my colleague, Kat Rollins. She helps us manage SAM.gov and knows more about the UEI than anybody ever wanted to know. So Kat's the right person to walk us through today, and I'm just going to hand it right over to her.
Thank you so much, Ken. And yes, my name is Catherine Rollins, and I am the lead program manager for SAM.gov. And today's focus for the Stakeholder Forum is around, as Ken mentioned, getting a unique entity ID SAM. As Ken also mentioned, this is the second in kind of a series that we're doing around the UEI transition. And the first one can be found on the Interact page that Ken was mentioning, and that has the link in the chat window. And that goes through the super high level of the transition of the unique entity ID from the DUNS number to this new unique entity ID SAM. I'm going to go over a little bit of that today, but just in case you wanted more information, there is that extra resource for a deeper dive into those questions. So to kick things off, I can go to the next slide. There we go. The agenda today. So I am going to give a little bit of a brief on the unique entity ID, a little bit about why it's changing, kind of the when it's happening, a little bit of the why we're actually making this change, and then what does it mean for you as a user? And we've got a couple different sort of persona or use cases that we're going to walk through to hopefully help people figure out how does it impact them, or where can they see this change? How can they adapt to it through this transition period? And then the last two parts are kind of looking at the system itself. And at this point in time, it is around SAM.gov functionality, and it will be a demo from our test site of how do you get a unique entity ID SAM without registering. So there are very specific use cases where you just need a unique entity ID. You don't need a full SAM registration. And so I'm going to show how you can actually do that live today in SAM, as well as previewing a little bit of the incorporating the unique entity ID SAM into that full SAM registration that is going to be a future promotion and release in SAM. So to kick things off, as I said, kind of starting high level, what is the unique entity ID? And so in here, the unique entity ID today, and has been, the DUNS number. And so this is the authoritative unique entity identifier used by the federal government. And again, today and prior, it is the DUNS number. The DUNS number is a 9-character numeric value, and it's managed, granted, and owned by Duns & Bradstreet. So a lot of our documentation and things right now, when you start off a registration or even to get UEI, it's going to be like, hey, you need a DUNS number and you have to go over Duns & Bradstreet to get it. Our validations are against Duns & Bradstreet. It's all of that heavy connection right there. Starting April 4th, 2022, the authoritative unique entity identifier used by the federal government will be the unique entity ID parentheses SAM. That's what we're calling it right now to distinguish it from the DUNS number. This unique entity ID SAM is a 12-character alpha numeric value. So it's not just a replacement of the 9-character numeric, it's actually a change in the data structure. The other important note here is that this number is going to be managed, granted, and owned by the government. So again, for right now today, the DUNS number is the authoritative unique entity identifier used by the federal government. Starting April 4th, the authoritative unique entity identifier will be the unique entity ID SAM. So when is this changing in a little bit more detail besides just that high level April 4th? We're gonna try not to just surprise everyone with it. So the idea is that there is that high level, just today it's a DUNS number, April 4th switches over and becomes the UEI SAM, and the DUNS number goes away. Breaking that down a little bit further is the idea that today, what we've already done is throughout our IAE systems. So this includes SAM, as well as FPDS, the sub-award reporting system, CPARs across the board, our past performance, all of the systems that IAE manages. What we've done is enable the ability for users when they go into view stuff to see both the authoritative DUNS number and the unique entity ID SAM. They show up generally together on the same screen, so that again, folks can start recognizing that yes, authoritatively it's still the DUNS, but what is my unique entity ID SAM? Or if you're a contracting officer, what is this entity's unique entity ID SAM? Helping users with that transition point now where they can see both pieces of information, so that come April, when the DUNS goes away and the UEI SAM becomes authoritative, hopefully it's not a shock to folks because you've gotten used to this new number and that association to the entity. The idea here is that we've included it not just in those views on the screen, but also in the IAE APIs and extracts. We also did an update to the FPDS Atom feed version 1.5.2, all which now include that UEI SAM as a data element. We've also updated our interfacing systems to be allowed for SAM to send the unique entity ID SAM or the DUNS number. For things like if you're posting an award notice to SAM, you could actually post it using the unique entity ID SAM or the DUNS number, either one. Again, the DUNS number remains the authoritative number for entity registrations and sub-award reporting. We want to keep highlighting that piece just to make sure. Even though we're showing the unique entity ID SAM, it is for the transition period and to help users before April 4th, but the DUNS is still authoritative right now. We also recently, on October 15th, enabled the idea of the sub-award recipients or user entities that need the unique entity ID, but do not need a full registration, can actually go to sam.gov and get that unique entity ID SAM today. And that's actually what I'm going to be showing you in a little bit. in the full demo. We are right now in the user accept testing of, it says the EVS, this is our entity validation service process in SAM.gov. So we are starting to go out to users with that full, what the changes will be come April 4th. And I'm gonna, again, show a little bit of that through screenshots and that it's not gonna be a live demo, but that full registration process with the new entity validation service. Because again, we're moving away from Duns & Bradstreet into a federally owned service. And then again, just that idea, on April 4th, the transition is complete. So you've already been able to use, hopefully by that point in time, systems will already be sending it, folks will already be used to the unique entity ID SAM. But so the difference, or what would change on April 4th, is actually just that we are removing that DUNS number from the views and interfaces, filters, all of that. The DUNS number goes away, and the entity validation service kicks off on the back end when you're doing a registration to make sure of the uniqueness of an entity. So why is this change happening from DUNS number 2, the unique entity ID? So the idea here is that the move itself of this transition from the DUNS number to the unique entity ID SAM is a federal government-wide initiative. So this is not just something that is impacting SAM. It is not just something that is impacting the IAE systems. This is federal-wide. OMB has directed federal agencies and systems to complete their transition to the unique entity ID SAM no later than April 4th, 2022. A big part of this, and GSA's specific role in this transition, is to assign the unique entity ID SAM as part of the entity registration process and preparing all of the other IAE systems to use the new unique entity ID. And so that's all that prep work and kind of helping users with that transition, and downstream systems go ahead and start being able to access the unique entity ID SAM now before that April 4th date. Why are we changing? The federal government is streamlining the entity registration process and making it easier for entities to do business with the federal government. This change simplifies the process of registering your organization to do business with the federal government, because entities will be assigned an identifier during the registration or can request one at sam.gov without needing to register. And it's a single point of entry. With this change, users don't need to go to a third party or an extra website or anywhere else. All of the requesting and information is within one system of sam.gov. So as I was saying before, that this is a federal-wide initiative. So each federal agency is going to have their own implementation plan of how they are going to get to this unique entity ID SAM by April 4th. The agencies themselves will be managing their updates on procurement award processes and systems, grant award processes and systems, invoicing and payment processes and systems. They're going to be able to tell you specifically how their agency is handling this change and timelines for those changes. For any federal agency that you do business with directly, okay, we are going to ask that you reach out to that agency about the changes to the award and payment process. We do have an example here where grants.gov has had, actually for a while now, their plan for the transition. And we put there the link to the grants.gov website and their planned UEI updates with timelines and how they're going to switch over their system to the UEI SAM. What does the unique entity ID SAM mean for me? So as I said in this section, I'm going to go over some specific use cases for users. Hopefully one of these will resonate with you. I have a feeling more than one might resonate with your actions. So hopefully it helps guide you through what might be needed. So to start off, it's the idea that an entity is already registered in SAM.gov. If that's the case, congratulations, you've already been assigned a unique entity ID. We did that on the back end, and it's already viewable on your entity registration record in SAM.gov. If this is a public record, you simply need to go to SAM.gov. You can do a search for your own entity, and you will be able to see the unique entity ID right along under the unique entity ID, the DUNS number, which is still authoritative. If you have selected that it is not for public viewing, then you will need to make sure that you go into your tier 2 space, the workspace area, to view that unique entity ID that has been associated with your entity registration. But we already did this for you, and it is already showing up. And again, we already have it in our extracts, search, displays, all of those other data elements. We're already showing this across the board. In this use case, we're specifically calling out a subawardee, but again, this is for anyone who does not need to be registered in SAM, but they do use currently the DUNS number for reporting within the federal government. So specifically, this use case was talking about, I'm a subawardee not registered in SAM.gov, and I use the DUNS number for subaward reporting. For these folks, you can today go into SAM.gov and request a unique entity ID SAM. We did not automatically do these associations, so you will have to come in to specifically take this action. Right now, the DUNS number, since it is required for the reporting that you are doing, it will ask for a DUNS number in order to complete the validations and give you the unique entity ID SAM for the future. And again, I'll show you in the live demo of how to request that. And again, this will not require a full registration. It would just be the validation in order to get the unique entity ID SAM. Along with this, you can continue to use DUNS for reporting, because again, the DUNS number is still authoritative. Starting on April 4th is when you would use that new unique entity ID SAM that you're getting through this new process. The next use case is I pull award data and reports from IAE systems and view the DUNS number. Again, right now, the unique entity ID SAM is available along with the DUNS number in the SAM APIs, the data extracts, and the FPDS Atom feed. Starting on April 4th, 2022, though, only the new unique entity ID will be provided and the DUNS field will go away. Pardon me. For folks who search for entity and contract award information using the DUNS number currently, again, today, you can go in to SAM.gov or the other systems, and you can use the DUNS number or the unique entity ID SAM to search for entities. Again, there's a caveat of starting April 4th, you will only be able to use the unique entity ID SAM. The DUNS number will not be able to be used and it won't be visible. The next one is a future state. So it's someone who's ready to come in and start registering their entity. So they don't already have one, but they want to prepare for it. If you are going to be registering your entity and it is before April 4th, you still need to make sure that you go to D&B and get a DUNS number, because again, that's still authoritative, it's still a requirement. Then you can go to SAM and register your entity. As a part of that SAM.gov registration process, you will be assigned a unique entity ID SAM. So you won't have to do anything extra, but before April, that D&B check and the DUNS number is still required. If you are looking to register your entity and it is after April 4th, then you do not need to get the DUNS number. And through the registration process in SAM, again, we'll do the validations and you will be assigned a unique entity ID SAM as a part of that registration process. So you won't need to take extra steps or go anywhere else. It'll be a single flow to get that UEI. So I'm going to switch over at this point in time and I'm going to do a demo. It will be from the test site because I have to use test data where I'm not actually registering an entity. But the functionality I'm going to be showing you is live on production SAM.gov. So again, if you are one of those entities who currently just uses the DUNS for subaward reporting or other government reporting, you are qualified and you don't need the full registration, then you can go through this process that I'm about to show in just a moment. So let me exit out of the slide deck. And I'm going to switch over to, this is, again, it's a test site, alpha.sam.gov, sorry. When you log in, you will be taken to your workspace. What I'm going to show you, you do need to be an authorized user, which means you do need to be logged in. The way that you can figure out if you are signed in or not is, again, up in the right-hand area. I'm going to kind of circle it here. Currently it says sign out. That means I am signed in. If I was not, I would not see any of these other identifiers, and this would say sign in. You simply select sign in and enter your login information for validation, and you go to your workspace. If you currently have entities or other entities that you manage than the one that you were trying to just get the unique entity ID SAM for, you will see the entity management widget, and you might see some information in here on active registrations or drafts for works in process or anything else. At this point in time, though, to set up a new entity, what you would want to do is select this Get Started button. And again, I am signed in as a non-federal user. It signed me out, so just kidding. So I am being asked to log in, which is proper because it does want to make sure I am authorized. So let me log in real fast. Okay, and 2 factors in. So again, from the workspace, now that I'm actually logged in, I've been inactive for too long, so it did kick me out. Again, as it should, and properly it did so. But from this workspace area, again, I do get this Get Started. There's also a place on the homepage, again, on the right-hand side that does have a Get Started as well. Either one of these Get Started buttons will take you to the same area to start the process. So from here, I'm going to select this one on the workspace. Test site is running slow, sorry. And then from here, I'm going to get a choice. So at this point in time, I have a choice if I can register an entity. So this is if you do need the full registration as well as the unique entity ID. And so this is for folks who are trying to do business with the federal government as a prime contractor or any one of those other ideas. It would be this top selection to register your entity. Very specifically, right? If you are reporting as a subawardee, that's the primary use case that we show here. But you're an entity that just needs a unique entity identifier, SAM, not the full entity registration. You can select the second option, which I'm going to do now. So again, where the DUNS number is still authoritative, and we are still doing validations against the DMB Entity Validation Service, the first thing that it asks for is the unique entity ID DUNS number. I am going to, again, I'm on a test site, so I am going to use test information. And when I get down to the physical address area, so the first piece is, again, it's a unique entity ID DUNS and the legal business name. The next section is talking about the physical address. And from here, I can select the country first. This is an adaptable area, whereas if I select American Samoa, for instance, it will change the options down below for, in this case, postal code becomes optional, state province becomes optional, city is still required. If I go back to the United States as the country selector, as you can see here, it will show that the zip code +4 is required, and then the city and the state is grayed out right now. This is because we have on the back end sort of done a hopefully helpful thing where when you get to the zip code and you put that in, it will automatically populate the city and the state information for you based upon that zip code. So my test one is in the US, so I'll keep it as the US. And then again, I'm going to enter in the zip code, and then it is automatically populating for me the city and the state information. These are still open fields in case for some reason the zip code isn't pulling back the right information from our zip code finder, but here is the information. I'm then going to select next once all of the information is input. One of the things that we have done is to try to make sure that a user has the information available, such as how many steps do they need to go through and where are they in the process as they are working through the system. So in this case, I was just on step 2, where it's enter entity information. That's the basic foundational piece of things. After that point in time, it would be to validate information. Then it's actually requesting the IAE SAM, and then it's receiving the IAE SAM. At any point in time that I'm not able to proceed or kicked back, again, I can follow along the top to know what state I am either still in or that I've proceeded on to the next level successfully. In this case, it actually came back and told me that I didn't have a match found. So this means that it looked for that DUNS number, the legal business name, and the address information in DNB, and nothing was found. At this point in time, I am returned and I stay on that step 1 for me to reevaluate, okay, did I put in the wrong information? Do I need to clarify something? What's going on there? Or is there something potentially wrong over at DNB? If that conversation with DNB needs to happen, because again, we don't own this information at this point in time, SAM does not, it is owned by Duns & Bradstreet. So at this point in time, you would need to use, we do have a sort of quick link here that will get you over to DNB to ask questions or look for help to be able to figure out what might be happening here and get it sorted out. Once you have the new information or corrected the information, you can continue this process again to hopefully make it all the way through. I'm actually going to select cancel at this point in time. And if at any point during the process you do need to cancel out, you don't have time to finish it or anything else is going on, you can cancel it. I'm going to select OK. It will cancel me out. It is also going to remove the information that I had in there. So it's not going to, sort of save it as a draft. It does delete the information that you had in there, and it does start you over fresh, I will say, from your workspace. So again, I'm going to select Get Started. This time, I'm going to put in a different test one, and I should get a different result. So that was my test case for a failure, I will say, or just the idea that the DUNS information was not found. So again, filling out this information. Including the zip code, which again should find my city and state for me. I can now select next. And as you can see, this time it actually took me to the next step, which was validate information. So before I even read into the page, I know, okay, the information was entered, and now I've moved on to the next step. Going down the page from here, again, this is test information, but it does show me what I entered and then what was matched to it on the D&B side. Again, if there are any questions with what came back or any issues or no, this isn't actually my company or this information is not right, the ask is for folks, you still need to go to D&B to fix the information at this time. Going down here, there is, similar to our registration process, there is a selector for this to be a public display record or not. By having it be not a public display record, it is still available to federal users, contracting officers and such, but it's not just on the public. There is additional information on here around the SAM public data file and FOIA requests and what that means in regards to this checkbox. I'm going to keep it checked for right now. And at this point in time, I'm going to select next. Again, I have now moved on to request DBI SAM. And at this point in time, it's basically telling me, okay, I do have a verified match. I put information in, it gave me back an entity. In some cases, that validated information could return multiple results. And that's why this seems redundant, because I only had one match before. If I had multiple, this is sort of verifying, okay, this was the information you put in. This is the one you selected. This is what we're going with. This is the one that you are saying you want the DBI SAM for. After I check over that information and say, yes, this is actually what I want, there is a question here, making sure that you are certified and authorized to conduct transactions under penalty of law for this entity. It is a test site and test data, so I am going to certify that I can for test purposes. And as you will see, if I don't have that checked, it won't let me do this. So I can close out if I'm not authorized to do this. As soon as I do certify, then I can request the unique entity ID SAM moving to the next stage. At this point in time, you will get the receive UEI SAM. Again, in this case, we're trying to make sure that the user has full information of what's going on. So in this case, there's actually the point that someone else had already come in and requested and got a UEI SAM for this entity. So that's what it's telling me here is a unique entity ID SAM already assigned. So again, it's the idea that it already has that number, but it's not registered in SAM. So there could be other users that are connected to this UEI, but there's not a registration started. It's not in that category of things. So again, I could just come down here and keep looking. At this point in time, the user can determine if they're done, if all that they needed really was the unique entity ID SAM, they can select done and it will just take them back to their workspace. They will see the UEI, this entity under their workspace, that entity management area, to make sure if changes do come up through address changes or anything else, they can manage those. The other option that I see from the screen though is continue registration. So if I got to this stage and then realized, wait, or something changed in between starting this process in this point in time, and I suddenly discovered, no, I do actually need the full registration. I can complete to here and then select to continue registration. Continuing the registration will take you to the current data entry pages with all of the necessary documentation. This process of doing this UEI association first does not negate or change any of the full registration, validation, or checkpoints that happen. So by continuing registration, you still have to go through that full process with all of those checks and answering everything that you need to. And that's all a part of those requirements. So at this point in time, I'm actually going to select done. And again, it will take me back to my workspace where I will be able to see any of the either registrations or UEIs that I'm connected to. At this point in time, I'm going to come back over to the slide deck. As soon as I've got that UEI SAM connected to the entity, especially if I chose to show up publicly, I can at that point in time, myself or any other user who is authenticated can go into SAM.gov and look for that entity and see both the DUNS number and the UEI SAM. They will also be shown on that page that the entity does not have a full registration. It is just that UEI SAM that they are associated to. So just making it clear for users. So again, just kind of highlighting the idea that from the home page, because I started from the workspace, but you can start this process directly from the home page. Again, it's that green Get Started. And then I'm going to quickly go through these because I was actually able to go through the demo. So I won't show everyone all of these fun things. This is one thing I wasn't able to show with the test data, I'm sorry, but if in real life, if the entity was actually already registered. So I was able to demo live the ideas around if an entity already had the UEI assigned, or if there was not a match in the D&B side of the house. If instead the use case is that the entity is actually already registered in SAM, again, we're not just going to pass that user on and be like, awesome, here you go. What triggers it at that point in time is we let the user know. So again, it's in that request UEI, that third step. And we would let the user know, look, this entity has already been registered. So it's already been assigned the UEI. It already has all that other stuff. At this point in time, to do anything with this entity, you will need to request a role. And we are, as you can see down here in the lower area, there is sort of a quick path to request that role. The request will open up and it will send the request to an active administrator on the entity registration to basically say, hey, this person needs access to it. That entity administrator can choose to reject the role request, or they can accept it. All of the current processes for role management with email notification of the request, the rejection, acceptance, where you can see the stuff in feeds, all of that still applies to this role request. We're just kind of giving an easy access that if this was the entity that you were trying to register, again, making sure the user has the full information, and then it's kind of a quick, here's a role request in order to proceed forward. So if they didn't know that they needed that role request, this kind of prompts them for that as a need. In order for that user to do anything with this entity registration, just like today in SAM, for the registration, the full complete thing, the user will need a role in order to do any of that. So that's why there's that role check here. Outside of that, I was able to show all of those other points. So that is, again, the getting a unique entity ID without the full entity registration process with the DUNS number currently today. And again, you can do that in SAM.gov right now. The next thing I wanted to show is to preview incorporating getting a unique entity ID SAM into the full SAM entity registration process. And so what we're doing here is many of these ideas are quote unquote the same, right? A lot of the requirements are the same. There's just some slight changes towards the beginning and with the validation process itself. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today, is that piece of things. So again, it's the idea that you need to sign in, you go to that Get Started page. At this point in time, again, you've got the two choices, the register entity, and then the second choice of the Get Entity ID SAM. This time I'm going to walk through that top choice. Again, this is not in production yet, and that's why I'm not doing a live demo. It's not even on our test site. I'm going to be showing some screenshots of what we're looking to do. So again, it would be selecting that register entity. At this point in time, for a non-federal user, you would have, similar to now, that purpose of registration. So this is where you would need to select the type of entity you're registering and declare why you are registering the entity to do business with the US government. As you can see, you do need to complete these sections before you are able to select next or to continue on to the next pieces. We've gotten asked, why are we changing this process? And a large part of it is this beginning workflow. What we're looking to do to help improve things for the users is adding additional help directly on the screen for users. We're updating the look and feel to go with more of the SAM and what the users are used to throughout the site. The things that are continuing are the idea that for right now, when we first implement this, the UEI DUNS is still used for validation. And then the idea that the UEI SAM is assigned with the current process. So those pieces are still in place. So after you've kind of gone through the purpose of registration, next what we're going to be showing the user is a confirmation of their purpose of registration information, and then highlighting, again, the steps that they're going to be going through. And depending on what they had in the purpose of registration, this page could change based upon what they've selected. At this point in time, they can up at the top go back and change the purpose of registration or continue forward. The next area is, again, a help sort of idea, but it's like, all right, now that you've selected your purpose of registration, you know the steps, here are the required pieces of information. And so it's the idea that when you go to the entity details, you're going to need the legal business name, the physical address, you're going to need the DUNS number. For the taxpayer information, you're going to need the TIN, you're going to need the taxpayer name, just all of those different pieces of information that are going to be checkpoints. You can see here there's a section for US registrants and also international registrants. There are differences there. And so again, we're trying to highlight those for the user so that they know what to expect in advance. At that point in time, it kicks off the entity validation service. With this part, and again, we're looking to start this change before April to get users used to this workflow. If it's before that April date, it does still require the DUNS number. After April 4th, that DUNS field goes away. It will still have the legal business name, the physical address, all of those other pieces. It's just that DUNS field will go away. Again, it's the idea that the fields will adapt based upon the user input. So based upon the country as to what things are optional and the labeling of the fields. Again, just as with the Get UEI ID that I demoed, once all the fields are complete, then you will be able to select next to go to the next screen. Some of the things that we are looking to improve that I was talking about was around help. So in this case, there is the idea of, as you can see in the far right, when you get to certain pages, there's a previous, a cancel, and a next that we're all used to. There's also a question mark or a help. And this help is to get people or users more directly to help articles to help them with the direct step that they're on so they can answer questions a little bit quicker and hopefully faster and easier. So it's kind of that on help right there for the users, depending on what they're on and what may be a question point. The other idea that in April we're looking to do is when we make the switch from, no match found, for instance, currently you have to go to DNB. With the switch to the new entity validation service provider, at that point in time, what we're looking to do is with a no match found or one of these question points of, you didn't just come back with what I needed. The user can select to create an FSD incident. And so this would be with our help desk, essentially. And it allows them to directly create that. This is a sample, again, not in development or developed piece, but the idea would be that starting in April, the user could select that create incident and they would get a form that basically they can add additional attachments to. There's a text field to add additional issues or language just to help customer service with what's going on. We will automatically give the search history and any other identifiers to help the agents when they get this ticket. Hopefully what this is going to do is allow, again, the users to get help directly from the EVS service and have that communication and enough information. So again, the EVS agent isn't starting from scratch when they get the ticket. Both the user and the FSD agent will be notified of the incident being created, the numbers, all of that sort of stuff. So again, just a kind of quick way for in that integration point between our help desk and SAM directly. The other thing we're trying to make sure to do for helping users is already right now on the fsd.gov homepage, there's a nice big green box that says help on UEI transition. If you select this help button, it will take you to kind of a larger help that cross-cuts across all of the resources that we have for the transitioning from UEI DUNS to UEI SAM. We've broken this out by user type. So as you can kind of see in here, it's, if you're managing an entity, we very specifically have FAQs and resources based for those folks. If you instead are a viewer or something else, again, there's additional resources that will guide folks to within that. So it's kind of our help in a subset across all of the different help documentation we have. As always, we do have the feedback tool in the footer of all of our sam.gov pages. It's a quick way to let us know what's working, what's not working, how you feel about things. If you are having like a not working thing, as in, the DUNS number wasn't found and you have a no match, the feedback tool is not the proper place to tell us about that. Again, no match, you need to go to DNB. But if you're trying to input something, and again, the zip code is saying that it's an erroring out or something like that, you need to go to the Federal Service Desk. That's actually our help desk. We do read the feedback, but it's not live and there could be a delay in all of this. So if you're actually having a technical issue or you have a question about the site, that should go to the FSD. This is more generic feedback about the site and the use here. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Great presentation. So we've got about 10 minutes left here in the program. And what we want to do, I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions about anything that Kat covered during the program, or if you have other questions, be sure to enter them down in the Q&A chat log, which is right next to the participants list and the regular chat log. In a few days, I know I said this at the beginning, but we had a bunch of people who joined. So in a few days, we'll post this slide deck, a recording of this session, and some of the written questions and answers to Interact, which is our blog space. So be sure to be following us on Interact and be sure to sign up to follow us on the Interact space, and then you'll get email notifications when we post there. So we've been answering some of the questions in writing as the program has gone along, but we've got a couple here that have a theme or have been repetitive throughout. So we're going to address a few of those over the next couple of minutes. Please keep entering any questions that you might have in the Q&A chat log. And I think my colleague Salome is going to help us go through some of the questions that we've gotten. So we'll do that for the next couple of minutes. Salome, what do we have?
Ken, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. I was like triple muted. Sorry about that.
It happens.
So the first question that I wanted to bring up was one, and that I know is a point of confusion among some users. So I thought it was worth discussing here. The question is, what scenario dictates the need for full SAM.gov registration versus just registering for a UEI number?
So
Pat, do you want to address?
kind of what it's like.
There you are. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. So the kind of primary basis is right now today, the case for if you need a full registration is the same. So if you are going to be a prime contractor, if you were bidding on a federal contract or a grant, for instance, you need the full registration. Again, it is, and I'm going to change the slide deck for 1 minute here. Or try to. So it goes, so again, it's that I want to be able to bid on federal contracts or other procurement opportunities. I want to be able to apply for grants, loans, and other federal assistance programs. I only want to apply for federal, right? Like that's your use case, right? The get UEI SAM, if you're just getting that number, it is, to me, that is a subset, that is the smaller group for that. And it is the sub-awardees. It means you are not a prime contractor. You are not, you're not bidding on your own. You are a subcontractor only. Then, today, again, you're only getting the UEI DUNS. And so, even after April, you can just have that UEI SAM. So the use cases for like, when do I need the full registration versus just the UEI SAM? It is the same definitions as today. If you only have a DUNS number, and that is all that your government folks are requiring of you, then you are okay to just get the UEI SAM. If you've been told you need a registration or to go through SAM for that registration, or you're planning to bid on a federal contract or other federal opportunity, then you will need that full registration still.
Thank you,
Hope that answered it. Okay.
Another question I've seen pop up several times in the pod today has been the following. We go to D&B today to make name and address changes for our DUNS number. How will that be done when we switch to using the UEI SAM?
So again, there's a kind of internal entity validation service. It does do its own checks. So there is monitoring similar to the D&B monitoring that currently happens. The big thing is just instead of going to D&B, you stay within SAM for any of those requests. Like we said, there are going to be ways to do the create incident to directly contact our EVS folks on specific things for, if a monitoring triggered and it's like, no, that address actually shouldn't be changed. Or as the question stated, this does need to change. How come it's not showing up yet? So we are working on kind of all of those different places for that contact. But again, it would be through SAM to our EVS provider.
Great, thank you. The next question is related to the ability to requesting a bunch of UEIs at once. They're asking if there is an API or any other way as a grant maker that they can request UEIs for all of their grantees at once.
So this is someone who is trying to get the UEIs?
Correct. They subgrant federal funds at a state level. So they basically want to go and pull down for all of their grantees and get all of those UEIs.
So we are working on kind of a, again, the DUNS to UEI. I know FPDS has some documentation right now. There is kind of a larger, sort of pull that we are working on. I don't believe that is in production right now to just grab those. You can, again, when it's kind of the mix, right? So if your folks have come, if they are already registered in SAM, then they have the UEI SAM. If they are a subcontractor or someone who doesn't have the full registration and they've only gone into, they're only an ESRS and they have not come to SAM to get that UEI SAM, we are not going to have that data. Once they come in and actually say, here's my DUNS, I don't need the full registration, they get validated and they get that UEI SAM, then they will show up in our extracts and polls. But I do want to make that part clear. If you are just looking for those that already have a registration and you want to get the UEI SAM for those, again, however you are currently pulling the information, we've got data services that give out the SAM data, and that will have the UEI SAM as well as the DUNS number. We have APIs that can pull that information. The search on the front end, that would be more one-offs unless you can select a filter by specifically type of entity or something else that you're looking for to get that group. But I mean, yeah, if it's for registrations that are already in SAM and you just need the DBI SAM for those, then any of those, current polls, the data services, the APIs, anything like that. If you're trying to get, again, ones that right now they're only in ESR as they're just sub-award or they're just reporting elsewhere and they don't have that registration, first they have to come in and actually get the UEI SAM, and then they will be in our systems, and then you can pull the data as well.
Great, thank you. And we have one final question for you. I think we have time for one more. If the UEI has automatically been assigned, do I need to do anything else?
So from the top one, I mean, honestly, just actually come to SAM and look at your new identifier, get kind of used to it. I know a lot of entities, they know their DUNS kind of by heart or right off the bat. So you're going to want to have that same familiarity with the UEI SAM come April. But if you are fully registered, you've already been assigned your UEI SAM, then no other action is needed from you.
Thank you, Kat. And those are the questions that we have the time to address here. So I'll turn it back over to Ken.
Okay, that's going to do it for today's program. I know I sound a little bit like a broken record. If you follow us and interact, you will get notified about our next program, which will most likely be in 2022. So as we get more information, we will certainly share it with you. So please stay tuned. And in the meantime, thanks everybody for joining today, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.